Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Been listening or watching Speed City for a few years. You know that this time of year we love it because Jonathan Green always goes down to New Zealand for what used to be called the Toyota Racing Series, now called the Formula Regional Oceania Championship. And it's part of the Formula Regional official FIA series that becomes the feeder series into really what is intended to go to Formula One, Formula Two, and the FIA Formula 3. But Jonathan, we've had an amazing number of these drivers over the years on our show. We've had Lando Norris back when he was with the Toyota Racing Series. We've had Lance Stroll. We've had others as well that you'll help me remember, but also the number of drivers that are currently in Formula One. You have that in that list, don't you, that have come through there?
Yeah. It's currently quarter of the F1 field. So Guan Yu Zhao is obviously a reserve driver, but he's a fully fledged Formula One super license holder. So that's the one that's the outlier. But yes, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll, Colapinto, Yuki Tsunoda, and Liam Lawson.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing that so many of those come through this tiny little series that I bet you even a lot of motorsports fans have never even heard of. But talk about it real quick. Just give us a quick overview, Jonathan, and how it works.
You call it a tiny series, but at the same time, they're doing 3,500 kilometers of racing in 5 weeks. So that's the equivalent of an entire IndyCar / Formula One season. And in fact, Jet Bowling did over 3,000. That's an American from Dallas, Texas. He did the most laps last year, and it was 3,500 laps. So the amount of what you're cramming into your brain in learning, I mean, you talk about learning the violin or something, there's your 10,000 hours. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing. And if they keep it on the straight and narrow, which is really what I look for, because it's such a lottery to go 5 weeks in a row and not have a mechanical or not have a prang with somebody else. Everybody's looking for, the points. And that is the big underlying thing. Yes, these guys are 16 to 22, some of them older, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the bottom line is there are 18 super license points up for grabs for the winner. And so I'm saying this series is halfway to Formula One because, 18 and you keep them for 3 years, you only need to go to Indy Next or to FIA F3, and potentially a good season after 5 weeks here could put you literally knocking on the door of Formula One with a super license at the end of this year. So some of these 16, 17-year-olds could be right where Bertoletto and Antonelli are at the end of this year.
We played a clip last week of Liam Lawson, who was talking about how Super Formula was advantageous for him to use that platform because it was so competitive. But he said he was able to do that series rather than go to Formula 2 again or something because he had built up so many super license points. How many points do you recall, Jonathan, how well he did in New Zealand?
Well, he won the championship, so he got the full 18. And he then went to Super Formula and was runner-up. So that pretty much... that was it.
You said something before we went on the air, Jonathan, that I thought was interesting. And it says something about the attention being paid to this series. If it wasn't before, it is now. And that's the fact that the Kingmaker Chip Ganassi's name is on one of these cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a massive story, and it's yet to be written, as it were. This is something that happened, funnily enough, at COTA. I've been aware of it for a while, and it's just taken a long time to get done. But to backtrack, Kiwi Motorsport, or Crosslink Kiwi Motorsport as they're known in the States, have dominated the first decade of F4 and FR in America. They've won more titles than anybody else. They've had more success than anybody else. But they also, during this time, the New Zealand summer, come home to New Zealand. It's a Kiwi-run team, Tina Larson and Gary Orton. And then they race in the Toyota series, and they have done for many years. I mean, for example, they ran Colapinto at this level to third place in the championship in 2020. Colapinto beating Yuki Tsunoda, for example. So yes, then that the association is that Chip Ganassi has been looking closely at how FR and F4 have produced, drivers like Kyle Kirkwood and Malukas and Rasmussen and many others, and suddenly turned around and went, I'm not on top of the junior. I need to know who's coming through. So he's partnered up with Kiwi Motorsport, the most successful junior team in America, and put his stickers on the car. So he has basically given the mandate here in New Zealand to say, find me some future stars. And that is great. And the other factor I'll put on that is that Chip's no fool. And the reason why he's thinking that is, guess what? The top 4 in Indy Next last season all graduated from the TRS series, the champion being Foster, the Brit, who came here just for 3 rounds last year, but just blew it away in Indy Next. And he puts a lot of that reason for the 3,000 kilometers he got down here, last year.
That's really amazing, isn't it? This series, like I called it little, and I was thinking that because I was looking around and seeing how many like social media hits and like the YouTube views and stuff, and they just don't get much. That's the part that's stunning to me, is that all the what you just said, the top 4 in Indy Next, and all these Formula One drivers, and they just don't get enough, and we're going to try to help that. But Greeny, you said 6 Americans, right?
5 Americans and a Canadian, and like I said, 10 of them all raced in either F4 or FR from other countries, like Australia, for example. Statties is one of the Australians. James Lawley, another one of the Australians coming to this series. So there's been a huge influx. But yeah, we've got Jet Bowling returning, who is a young kid from Dallas, Texas. We've had him on the show. He got the most improved driver last year. And I'm a big believer, a bit like Macau Grand Prix. It's a really maelstrom field to 5 weeks. And I think the first year you do it, it's just coming at you so fast. The tracks are small. It's hard to overtake. The car might be different than you've driven, although the Tata chassis is used in America. So Jet has gone from a season where he was occasionally top 10, but most improved, got the most miles, then did FR, got 3rd overall in FR, behind another guy who came down here last year, Titus Sherlock, and another guy from Texas. And the championship was won by the Rookie of the Year here in Toyota, Patrick Woods-Toth, who we had on the show, as you know, from COTA, the champion of FR this year. So there's no question it's been a great breeding ground for young Americans. And I also think this is, the Chip Ganassi thing is just the beginning, because Americans, as you well know, haven't committed to going to Europe because it's not an easy place to go. I don't need to tell you they wouldn't be fans of necessarily, I'll be political for a second, of going to the Middle East to race. So New Zealand is a great home to hone their skills pre-season if you've got the money. It's about 176,000 to do all 5 rounds, which actually is pretty reasonable for a season of FIA F3, or not FIA.
Well, it is.
FRECA, excuse me. So it's cheaper than a FRECA season, and you combine it into 5 weeks. It's also a lot of fun. They get to do a lot of tourism stuff as well. New Zealand's a great country. They speak the language. It's safe. Et cetera, et cetera. A lot of them bring their families down because they're 16. They can't drive a road car. So it tends to be a really warm and fuzzy feel in the hospitality, because mum and dad are there in the hospitality watching you. You're learning from people like Stephen Giles runs the team, Mika Hakkinen's engineer back in the day when he won the World Championship. People like Martin Donnelly are here as a driver coach. Roberto Moreno is here as a driver coach. So there's some big names involved in the background, as it were.
And more about the series itself. How many different circuits? How many different places?
5 different circuits, 3 races at each round.
Okay. And they're also doing
on both islands.
Okay. And they're also doing some other stuff too. Like, wasn't it last year they started a synthetic fuel program as well, or some sort of?
Yes, they have a complete synthetic fuel. It is fossil free, they like to call it. And it's been they were the first to do biofuel. So again, you talk about the nice thing about New Zealand is it is small enough And Toyota New Zealand have picked this up and spent a lot of money on it. And of course, Toyota, being a sort of rugged place that this is, their Hiluxes and their RAV4s and their Tacomas are really popular because it's a very rural farming world down here. So it's not a surprise to see Toyota sponsoring this. But at the same time, it is a great environment for these young kids to learn. It really is.
And they use it's basically similar to an F3 car, right? It's about a 300 horsepower turbocharged Toyota 4-cylinder. Does that sound right?
Yep. Turbocharged, basically based on the Corolla engine, and it gets about 310 brake horsepower. It's actually quicker than the FR car in America, which is a little bit heavier.
Okay. Wow.
Where can we see these races here in the continental US?
They're live streamed. They're live streamed on what will be called. We've got a new promoter this year called Next Gen, but I will make sure that you see that. I think I'm going to be doing quite a lot of social media as much as I can on places like Instagram and stuff, which I'll do through myself and Speed City. So I'll be constantly kind of keeping up to date. But yeah, you can watch all the races live online and obviously go to YouTube and watch them afterwards when you're ready.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah, this is going to be another.
And by the way, our biggest fan is Helmut Marko, because the story we left out was where I was going with Isaac Hadjar, is that right back to Daniel Kvyat, the first. Well, Brendan Hartley won the first race, and he became a Red Bull Junior. But Helmut Marko and Christian Horner swear by the series because they brought Kvyat here, they brought Richard Verschoor here, obviously Lawson they signed here, they brought Lucas Auer here, the Austrian, and got him to DTM, and now they brought this new kid, Arvin Lindblad. So Red Bull, the Ferrari Academy brought Marcus Armstrong here. And we've had Alpine drivers. We had 2 Alpine Academy drivers last year. So, the thing that's created Doohan, Corti is the Italian Corti came down here last year. So we've had a really good, strong tie with the Formula One junior teams. And I know for a fact when I'm doing live commentary that those sorts of guys are tuning in because they genuinely are looking for the talent, and they can do it in a brief period of time rather than following the FIA 15-round series all the time. So, and it's a pressure cooker. This is really this is a boot camp, if you like. Yeah. This is like joining the Marines. It's like, right, has he really got what it takes to handle it and handle the pressure?
You stole what I was going to say.
That leads to this upward spiral. We get media watching. You get kingmakers like Ganassi watching.
Yep.
And the drivers themselves see, okay, this is tough competition. This is what people are watching. So if I go there and do well, I can give myself a leg up in my career.
Yeah, and I was thinking, Jonathan, obviously they're all watching, but there's bound to be some representatives from some of these teams, from these Formula One teams there with, scouts, essentially.
Yeah, for example, driver coach for Foster last year was Spencer Pickett, IndyCar driver, and we've had many. We've had many good driver coaches come down here who've got their own, experience. Jamie Walter Campbell, another sports car driver, came down here with Habsburg, who was second in the Macau Grand Prix. There's some, it's interesting, and it's a great place to be. So I think people actually want to, it's great to go motor racing where you actually want to be rather than the cold of Snetterton one Sunday morning.
Yeah, I was telling somebody you were down in New Zealand. I said, oh, good for him. He's getting some time away. That's a beautiful place. I was like, well, yeah, he does turn it into a bit of a vacation. All right, before we get off this topic, Jonathan, I got to ask you, I know it's really hard to do this because they're all so young and, they're all just coming up. Are there favorites here? Are there, you talk about one of the Red Bull guys, but are there favorites?
Well, there's no question. Arvin Lindblad was only announced last week. And so when I was looking at the field, I was almost kind of rubbing my hands with glee that there was no favorite and that we had a lot of inexperienced and returning rookies or guys that were a little bit more experienced than they were last year. So there was no obvious favorite. But since then, Lindblad has jumped in, and there's no question he is the favorite. Then you've got people like Will Brown, who is the supercar champion. Now, he's coming in because the promoter is also one of the part owners of Triple Eight in supercars. So he's got a strong connection across the pond, and he wants to see that continue. Tony Quinn is his name. And so Will Brown is coming to do 3 rounds. He's not really done single-seaters before. He did Formula Ford, but he's going to be a star. And he's going to race in the Red Bull colors because he's sponsored by Red Bull. He's with Shen van Gisbergen as we speak. And funnily enough, the Trackhouse boss is with them because they've been doing karting and midget racing and, all that sort of stuff. And so that's one to watch. But from an American point of view, Nikita Johnson is the one that keeps coming to mind. He's only 16. And he's shattering a lot of records, and there's a lot of people talking about him. So put that in your pipe. He was runner-up, I think, in the Formula US Pro 2000 Championship this year, and he's headed to GB3 this year with High Tech. So, and he's just 16. So I would say that even if he doesn't win, if he beats Lindblad a couple of times, I think people will start talking about, and that's great now. So the opposite is true now, which is I thought it was going to be wide open, but now these kids have a benchmark. A guy who has achieved is going to be in F2 next year with Campos, a very good team. He's got Helmut Marko earmarking him for greatness. So if you beat that kid, you're also, as basically Liam Lawson did. Auer came down that year in 2019, and Helmut Marko said, "Oh, right, go down, get some experience, and we'll get you some super license points, and we'll put you into DTM." But Lawson blew him away the first race, and by like 15 seconds. So suddenly it was like, who's this?
All right, guys, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have one little final segment on Formula One. We're going to give you our predictions for next year. Back after these messages.